I sat across from someone I've known my whole life and realized I was looking at a stranger who had spent years building a case against me. Opening. The coffee meeting I didn't see coming. I'm 27. My sister is 30. We grew up in a suburb that was neither remarkable nor miserable. 2 working parents, a 4-bedroom house, a dog that lived too long and then died too quickly, a neighborhood where you could ride bikes until the streetlights came on. By any external measure, it was an ordinary childhood. By most internal ones, too, at least for me. My sister remembers it differently. She always has. The small resentments surfaced occasionally when we were younger. A comment here about how Mom had been more excited at my school play, a complaint there about how Dad had stayed longer at my soccer games. I absorbed these observations the way younger siblings often do, with a mix of guilt and confusion. Was I favored? I didn't feel favored. I felt like a kid who was sometimes treated well and sometimes not, same as everyone. I never thought these murmurs would calcify into a financial claim. That they would become, in fact, a number. $40,000, to be precise. She texted me in March asking if we could get coffee. Need to discuss something important, she wrote. That phrase should have been a flag. Nothing good ever followed it. But she was my sister, and I thought maybe she needed help, needed advice, needed a sibling to listen. I said yes without hesitation. I showed up 10 minutes early and ordered us both lattes, because that's what I always did. I thought I was being a good brother. She walked in with a folder. Not a notebook. Not a stack of papers she'd casually brought along. A folder, organized, tabbed, the kind you bring to a meeting you've prepared for. She set it on the table between our drinks and sat down, and I remember thinking she looked both resolved and terrified, the expression of someone who has rehearsed something 100 times and is finally saying it out loud. I've been doing some calculations, she said. Part 1, the spreadsheet. I'll say this before I say anything else. I don't think she was lying. I've thought about that a lot in the years since this happened, and I'm convinced that the woman who slid those pages across the cafe table believed every number on them. She'd spent real time on this. Months, possibly years. She'd talked to relatives, consulted childhood memories, tried to reconstruct a financial record of our upbringing from the inside out. The spreadsheets were color-coded. She'd built formulas. I calculated the discrepancy in what our parents invested in each of us, she said. Not just money. Time, attention, resources. Over the span of our childhoods. The difference, as best I can determine it, is approximately $40,000, in your favor. I didn't say anything. I looked at the pages. She'd estimated birthday presents, hers versus mine, based on what she remembered receiving and what she'd observed me receiving, adjusted for perceived value, and what she called parental enthusiasm differential. She'd included estimates for clothing, for school supplies, for after-school activities. She'd calculated something labeled opportunity cost of parental attention, which attempted to quantify the emotional investment our parents had made in each of our achievements and assign it a monetary equivalent. There was a line item, I am not making this up, for estimated additional food consumption due to higher metabolism and larger frame. She'd estimated that I ate more than her as a teenager and had attempted to translate the difference in grocery spend into a childhood inequity. The bottom line, $40,312. I owed her, she explained, either that sum in cash, or equivalent equity in the apartment I'd purchased 2 years earlier. This isn't punishment, she said. Her voice was steady, but her hands weren't. It's correction. You benefited from a system that disadvantaged me. You didn't create that system, but you benefited from it. Now you have an asset. I have nothing comparable. I want to be made whole. I sat there with my latte going cold and looked at my sister, who had brought a folder to a coffee meeting, and I felt something that wasn't anger. It was closer to heartbreak. Because she meant it. Every word. The folder wasn't a manipulation tactic. It was the evidence of someone who had been constructing this case in her head for years and had finally convinced herself it was airtight. I asked if I could take the pages home and look at them carefully before responding. She said yes. She seemed relieved, I think. She'd expected me to yell. I wasn't going to yell. Part 2. Examining the math. I sat with those spreadsheets for 3 evenings. The first thing I noticed, as I read through her calculations, was that she'd estimated my college education as more expensive than hers. That struck me as strange, because I'd attended a state university, a good one, but a public school, while she'd gone to a private liberal arts college. I looked up the tuition records I still had. My 4 years of undergraduate education had cost roughly $48,000 in total, including room and board. Her private college tuition alone had been approximately $45,000 per year. Her college had cost our parents somewhere in the range of $180,000. Mine had cost $48,000. She'd listed my college expenses as higher. I called my mother that weekend and asked, carefully, gently, whether she and my father had kept any records from our childhood, old receipts, bank statements, anything that might reflect what they'd spent on each of us. I didn't tell her why. My mom is a natural archivist. She keeps everything. She said she'd look through the files in the basement. 3 days later, she called back with a voice I recognized as worried. She'd found things. Dance lesson invoices. My sister had studied ballet and contemporary dance for 8 years. The average monthly cost had been around $200. Over 8 years, that was roughly $19,200 in dance lessons alone. I had played recreational soccer through the parks department, which had cost about $75 per season. My sister's car, purchased for her at 16, was a 2-year-old model that had cost around $14,000. My car, given to me at 17, was a 10-year-old model that had cost $4,500. My sister's Sweet 16 party had involved a rented venue, a DJ, a catered dinner for 60 guests. My 16th birthday had been a backyard barbecue. Did you try to treat us equally? I asked my mother. She was quiet for a long moment. We tried, she said. We tried very hard. If anything, your sister always seemed like she needed more reassurance. More celebration. We may have overcorrected in her direction because of that. A pause. We never thought it would become this. I presented the actual financial evidence to my sister at a second meeting, same cafe, 2 weeks later. I'd organized my own folder. I laid out the college cost comparison, the dance lesson total, the car values, the party difference. I walked her through it the way I'd want someone to walk me through something I'd gotten wrong. Carefully, without cruelty, giving her time to absorb each point. She looked at the papers for a long time. Money isn't the only measure, she finally said. Update 1. The goalposts. She came with spreadsheets, estimated presents, food consumption, opportunity cost of parental attention. But when I showed actual records, her private college versus my state school, her dance lessons, her newer car, she dismissed the evidence. The math only counted when it supported her conclusion. I've thought a lot about what happened in that second conversation, because it's where the nature of the dispute revealed itself completely. When I showed her that her college cost $132,000 more than mine, she said that our parents had helped me more with my application, driven me to more campus visits, spent more time on my essays. When I pointed out that she'd had 8 years of dance lessons while I played free recreational sports, she said that dance had been her way of trying to win their approval, while I had approval automatically and didn't need lessons to earn it. When I noted that her car had been newer than mine, she said that material things were never what she was really talking about. First it was $40,000 in quantifiable spending. When the numbers proved wrong, it became about love, unmeasurable, unfalsifiable. The goalposts moved to wherever they needed to be. This wasn't accounting. This was a feeling shopping for justification. And here is where I want to be careful, because I think this is the most important thing I understood about my sister through this whole experience. She wasn't lying when she changed the subject. She wasn't being strategically deceptive. The money had never actually been the point. The spreadsheet was an attempt to give a shape to something that didn't have one, a childhood feeling of being on the outside, of watching through glass while her brother stood in the warmth. She tried to make that feeling legible, to translate it into something that could be addressed, corrected, paid. When the translation failed, she returned to the original, the feeling itself. You got more love, she said. I felt it every day. I can't make you see it, but I lived it. I asked her how she measured that. She said she felt it. I asked how I could disprove something that existed only in her perception. She said I couldn't. I asked whether she understood that a claim that can't be disproven by any evidence is a claim that evidence can't address. She said, your evidence is the world protecting you again. Update 2. The family meeting. I asked my parents if they'd be willing to sit down with all 3 of us together. I thought it mattered that they hear the actual numbers from the people who had kept them, rather than from me. I also thought my sister deserved to say what she'd said to me directly to the people she felt had wronged her. Whatever the outcome, it seemed like a conversation that needed to happen. My father printed the old records. 8 years of dance lesson payments, tabbed and dated. The college tuition invoices from both institutions, side by side. Car purchase documentation. My mother brought photos of my sister's Sweet 16, 60 people, a decorated venue, a DJ booth, alongside photos of my birthday barbecue in the backyard. My sister sat across from them, and I watched her face as my father laid out the evidence. It wasn't the face of someone who'd been caught in a lie. It was the face of someone watching their reality be contested, which is a different and more frightening thing. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes went distant. You kept these records to protect yourself, she said. We kept them because your mother keeps everything, my father said. His voice was patient and a little broken. Sweetheart, we loved you. We loved you both. If we failed you in some way, if you felt less seen, we want to understand that. But we can't acknowledge that we spent more on your brother when we demonstrably spent more on you. More money doesn't mean more love. No, my mother said. It doesn't. But he's asking for money. We're showing you the money. And the money shows us investing more in you. My sister stood up. I was hoping this meeting would be different. I should have known better. She looked at me with something that wasn't quite anger, it was more like confirmation. You convinced them to protect you. You always did. She picked up her bag. I want acknowledgement. That's all I've ever wanted. If you can't give me that, I don't know what I'm doing here. She left before my father could respond. My mother looked at her empty chair for a long moment. Then she looked at me. Did we do this? She asked. I don't think you did, I said. But I think she experienced something. I just don't think we can fix it by denying what the records show. My father poured 3 glasses of wine. We sat there for a while without talking. Update 3, the therapy question and the circular logic. A few days later, my sister sent me a long message. Her therapist, she said, had validated her experience of unequal treatment. Her therapist had confirmed that her feelings of being less loved were real, that they had affected her self-esteem and her adult relationships and her career trajectory. She felt that the therapeutic validation supported her claim. Her therapist validates her experience. Therapists validate feelings, that's their job. But validation isn't confirmation. Your feelings are real isn't the same as, your brother owes you $40,000. Therapy processes pain. It doesn't issue invoices. I understand what therapists do. I understand that the therapeutic relationship is built on taking a client's internal experience seriously, that a good therapist doesn't argue with a patient's perception of their own childhood. I don't doubt that my sister's therapist had sat with her through years of pain and helped her feel heard in ways that her family hadn't managed. That's real and valuable. But there's a difference between your feelings of being less loved are real experiences that deserve to be processed, and your brother owes you his apartment. The first is a therapeutic acknowledgement. The second is a financial claim that requires external evidence, not internal experience. She also pointed to our adult circumstances as proof of the childhood disparity. I had an apartment, a stable job, savings. She had debt, a struggling career, no property. If we had received equal treatment, she argued, wouldn't we have equal outcomes? She said our different adult outcomes prove childhood inequality. But I lived with 4 roommates while she got her own apartment. I drove a $3,000 car while she financed $25,000. I saved while she spent on trips and experiences. Adult outcomes reflect adult choices, not just childhood inputs. After college, I lived with 4 roommates for 3 years in a 2-bedroom apartment where 2 of us shared a room. I drove a car I'd bought for $3,000 that overheated in summer and resisted starting in winter. I packed lunch every day for 2 years. I declined vacations. I put every surplus dollar into savings and then into a down payment. It was not a glamorous period. It was a deliberate one. My sister, after graduating from her private college, rented her own apartment. She financed a $25,000 car. She traveled. I'd seen the photos, the European trips, the beach vacations. None of this was wrong. Adults are allowed to spend their money as they choose. But our different financial positions at 27 and 30 were not mysterious artifacts of differential childhood investment. They were the direct results of different adult priorities. When I said this to her, she said that her spending was a coping mechanism. That she'd spent money on experiences and comfort because growing up feeling unloved had given her anxiety, and she'd needed to self-soothe. That her financial choices were themselves consequences of the childhood injury I'd caused by existing as the favored child. Therefore her debt was my fault, and her debt and my apartment were both traceable to the same source, the $40,000 she hadn't received. I saw the circle clearly. Childhood inequality caused her adult spending. Her adult spending caused her current debt. Her current debt versus my current assets proved the childhood inequality. Any evidence against the theory was dismissed as denial or gaslighting. Any evidence for the theory was embraced as confirmation. The conclusion had been reached before the investigation began. Our parents spent more on her by tens of thousands. College alone proves that. But she experienced less love. Those 2 things can both be true. She got more resources but felt less connected. But her feeling doesn't create my debt. I didn't control her internal experience. This is the thing I came back to, over and over. I believe she felt less loved. I believe that experience was real and painful and formative. I believe that perception and reality can diverge, that a child can be surrounded by care and still feel unseen, that the way love is expressed matters as much as whether it exists. I don't dismiss her pain. I can hold her pain and still refuse to pay for it. Update 4. The boundary and the aftermath. I called her and told her clearly, I wasn't going to pay $40,000. I wasn't going to give her equity in my apartment. The financial records contradicted her calculation, and even if they hadn't, feelings don't generate debts. I was sorry she'd felt less loved. I was sorry she was struggling. But I hadn't caused her internal experience, and I couldn't be held financially responsible for it. Then you're proving it, she said. You're proving you were always the favorite. You get to keep everything while I have nothing, and you're fine with that. I'm not fine with it, I said. I'm devastated by it. But I can't solve it by giving you my apartment. I want you to acknowledge what happened. I acknowledge that you experienced something painful. I cannot acknowledge a version of history that the actual evidence doesn't support. The evidence was assembled to protect you. It's always been assembled to protect you. A long silence. We're done. I can't have a brother who benefits from my suffering and won't give anything back. I'm not your reparations fund, I said. If our parents actually failed you, and I'm not certain they did, then that grievance is with them. But even they show documented evidence of investing more in you. What you experienced as inequality might have been their failure to make you feel loved even when they were investing in you. I can't compensate for how their love was expressed. I can only live my own life and invite you into it as an equal. She hung up. Within 2 weeks, she'd contacted several relatives with her version of events, that I had refused to acknowledge her suffering, that I'd chosen money over family, that I'd dismissed everything she'd been through. The family, predictably, fractured. Some relatives thought the $40,000 claim was unreasonable and told her so. Others felt I should have given her something as a gesture of goodwill, even if the math was flawed. A few chose sides in the way people do when they're uncomfortable with complexity and need someone to be right and someone to be wrong. She wanted me to acknowledge inequality with money. But the inequality didn't exist in the evidence. Only in her feelings. I can't pay compensation for a feeling that contradicts the facts. That's not accountability, it's tribute to a narrative. My mother cried on the phone with me several times that spring. My father went quiet in the way he does when he doesn't know how to fix something. I started therapy, not because I thought I'd done something wrong, but because the guilt of having more, even when the evidence showed I didn't, is a strange and heavy thing to carry. Because losing a sister to a narrative you can't change is a grief with no clean name. Resolution: what the $40,000 actually was. She needed a villain to explain her struggles. I was available, successful enough to pay, close enough to blame. The $40,000 gave her pain a shape and a debtor. My refusal confirmed what she already believed: the world is unfair, and I'm part of the unfairness. Some narratives can't be changed. Some siblings can't be saved from themselves. A year has passed. My sister and I don't speak. I hear about her occasionally through my parents. She's still in therapy, still building the architecture of the childhood narrative, still in financial difficulty. Her life hasn't improved since the confrontation, and this does not surprise me, because $40,000 was never going to fix what was actually broken. The $40,000 was a translation attempt, grief trying to become legible, pain trying to find a shape that could be addressed and corrected and paid off. What she actually needed, I think, was for someone to sit with her in the original experience. To say, you felt unseen. That was real. You felt less celebrated, less noticed, less chosen. That was real, regardless of what the receipts show. The receipts don't decide how childhood felt. They only decide who paid for what. I understand why she went to the receipts. We live in a culture that struggles to take emotional pain seriously unless it can be quantified. I felt less loved sounds like a feeling. $40,000 of quantified differential treatment sounds like a claim. She was trying to make her pain into something serious enough that it couldn't be dismissed. The tragedy is that the translation failed, not because her pain wasn't serious, but because the translation was wrong, and when I showed her the translation was wrong, she heard it as one more dismissal of the pain itself. I couldn't fix that. I don't know if anyone could have. It's November now. Holiday dinner at my parents' house, the first Thanksgiving I've sat through knowing she wouldn't come. My mother set 4 places and then stood at the table for a moment and quietly removed one. She put the extra plate back in the cabinet with the careful movements of someone trying not to make noise about something too large to be quiet about. My father talked about football with an intensity he doesn't usually have. My mother kept refilling things that didn't need refilling. The absence at the table was architectural. It restructured the room. I brought the old photos, a box I'd found at my parents' house, pictures from when my sister and I were young. Before any of this. There's one I kept looking at all evening, the two of us at what must be a birthday party, maybe mine, maybe hers, one of us in a party hat and both of us laughing at something out of frame. She looks completely happy. I don't know if she was. I can't go back and ask her. Memory is unreliable, and her memory and mine have been incompatible for years, and I can't resolve them by examining the photograph. What I can say is this. I don't know if she was already feeling the things she felt by the time that photo was taken. I don't know if the smile was real or performed, or some combination of the two that even she couldn't have separated. Childhood is long and complex, and feelings accumulate in ways that don't match the external evidence of the moment. She might have been laughing and feeling overlooked at the exact same time. That doesn't mean I owe her my apartment. My sister calculated that our parents loved me $40,000 more. She wanted compensation, cash or apartment equity. But when I found actual records, her private college versus my state school, her dance lessons, her newer car, they showed our parents spent more on her. The evidence contradicted her calculation. So she shifted from money to love, unmeasurable, unfalsifiable, whatever she needed it to be. The narrative wasn't about facts. It was about a feeling that required a villain, a debtor, someone to hold accountable for pain that couldn't be explained otherwise. I was available. I had an apartment. I became the explanation. But I couldn't pay for a feeling. Couldn't compensate for her experience of childhood with my adult property. Couldn't fix her internal world by emptying mine. She's gone now, cut contact, told the family I chose money over acknowledging her suffering. Maybe that's how she sees it. Here's how I see it. I refused to pay a debt that didn't exist in reality, only in her interpretation. I refused to make myself responsible for her psychology. I refused to let her narrative become my obligation. She wanted $40,000 to prove she'd been wronged. I wanted a sister who didn't see me as an unpaid invoice. We both ended up with nothing from each other. The apartment stays mine. The relationship stays severed. And somewhere, my sister is still adding up everything she didn't get, still looking for someone to send the bill. It won't be me. Some debts don't exist except in the minds that create them. Some calculations are feelings pretending to be math. I can't pay for feelings with property. I can only live my life and hope someday she finds her peace without needing my apartment to achieve it. A bitter victory. The apartment stays. The sister is gone. The truth is documented and dismissed. And there is an empty chair at Thanksgiving that will be there next year too, and the year after, for as long as a feeling goes looking for a debtor instead of a cure.